In this video, I'm gonna be talking about the basics of deer hunting. We're gonna start off talking about the deer, what they care about, and why. From there, we'll be moving on to some popular ways to actually set up on deer to make them come close to you. And then at the end, we're even gonna be taking a look at some specific stands I've set up, and we'll talk about why they're good. Because on both of them, we've killed a lot of deer on. So first thing first, when you're hunting any animal, there's two things you gotta know. One, you gotta know as much as you can about the animal. And two, you gotta know as much as you can about the area you're hunting the animal. And if you know a lot about both of those, you're gonna be pretty deadly. But the first thing, learning about the deer. So in the life of a whitetail deer, the number one thing they're worried about is not dying. You see, in most of the United States nowadays, the only true predator to an adult whitetail deer is gonna be humans. But back in the day, they had wolves, they had mountain lions, they probably had the saber-toothed tiger or something crazy like that. They had a lot of things to be afraid of. And even after all those things are gone, their instincts are still afraid of them. So they're still looking for wolves, even though they ain't even here no more, you know? But all that to say, they're very careful and spooky animals. And they're always looking for something to run away from. So you gotta be real careful as you hunt them. Deers have eyes, ears, and noses. With their eyes, they don't have amazing vision. Their vision's not as good as ours long distance, but they are really good at picking up movement. So if they're ever staring at you, don't be moving because they see movement better than anything. As long as you stay still, they're probably gonna have a really hard time seeing you. Now we come on to ears. As you can see in this picture, the deer's ears are like big and they're huge. And not only that, they can actually move them around. They can move them around to where they can like pinpoint stuff. And they're pretty good at listening too. They got pretty good ears. But their ears aren't perfect. And that's because sticks break in the woods all the time. There's squirrels running around making noise. Depending on where you're hunting, there may be a road over there where there's car noises. So if you're deer hunting and you're with somebody, you can actually whisper, you can make a little bit of noise and get away with it. Now obviously you don't want to be yelling because they can hear you, and you don't want to be rattling around, they can hear you. But their sight and their ears aren't their biggest superpower. Their biggest superpower is their nose, and there is nothing that we can compare that to. If they get a whiff of you at all, they know you're there. Now they might care, they might not. Bigger bucks, they care a lot more. Younger does, they may not care as much, but they use their nose to survive. And that's why you hear a lot about playing the wind, because if the wind is blowing from you and carrying your scent to where the deer are at, man, they're gonna know you're there. They're gonna be alarmed. And if they're smart enough or spooky enough, they're just not even gonna come around. You won't even see them. So it's always best to try to play the wind to where the wind is actually blowing your scent away from where the deer are gonna be. Sometimes the wind is unpredictable. Sometimes it swirls. And that's just what makes it complicated, because there's not much you can do about a swirling wind. But keep that in mind, because if you're ever deer hunting, you're like, I'm being so quiet, I'm not moving. But the deer look right at me. It's because they use their nose. And they know how to use it. They caught your wind, and just by catching a whiff of your wind, they know exactly where you are. They'll look at you, will not move, you will not make a noise, and they will look up at a tree and stare at you. That's because they smell you. Happens all the time. Sometimes you're just unlucky with a wind swirl and there's not much you can do about it. But now that we talked about the deer's senses, let's talk about what the deer actually care about. So what do they care about? Number one, just like we were talking about, not dying. They're going to use all those senses, but during the day, they're actually going to hide in the woods and stuff. It's pretty rare that right in the middle of the day, you're going to see deer out in the open field. Now don't get me wrong, sometimes they'll do it. But generally during the middle of the day, they're going to be out in the woods or in a thicker place to where they can lay down, since deer actually lay down and sleep during the middle of the day. They just sit there and chill in thick stuff where they feel protected. That's going to be important because we're going to use that knowledge to set up later. And second thing they care about is food. And most of the time they eat in the evenings and at night. And that is when you're very likely to see them out in the field like this. Whether it's a cornfield, a bean field, or sometimes even just a grass field or your yard. Towards the evening of the day, they start moving out of their thicker stuff and coming into these more open areas where they have more food to eat. And so right here, probably not gonna see a deer right here in the middle of the day. I would say there's like a 0.3% chance, unless he's just lost or something. But during the evening time and the nighttime, there's like a 90% chance there's deer out here. There's deer out here in this field all the time. It's because there's good food for them to eat. And since it's dark and in the evening, they feel more comfortable coming out into the open. That goes back to just being ambushed back in the day when they had wolves and stuff. They're a lot more comfortable at night because they feel more safe at night. Let's talk about some food sources real quick. Like I mentioned, it could be an agriculture field, whether it's cornfield, whether it's a soybean field. Depending on what kind of grass you have, they'll eat some of that. People plant food plots like brassicas and clover. They really like to eat that. If there's some fruit trees around, they'll eat apples off the bottom of them. Sometimes out in the big woods, there'll be acorn trees, which are oak trees. They'll drop acorns and they'll go eat those. And then a really big one for deer hunters is if you're allowed to bait in your state, which you got to check in on that, sometimes people will buy bags of corn and just dump them out. boom. It's literally a magic pile of food, and the deer treat it like that. We'll talk a little bit about that later, but now on to the third thing they care about, and that is breeding. Okay, this is breeding season, but here's the catch. It's usually only about 2 to 3 weeks of the entire year, but during that breeding season, it is unreal because the bucks, which are the hardest deer to kill, they don't care about food, and they don't even really care about sitting still and being safe. This is the time of year you see big bucks running straight through town, or big bucks running through the middle of a field in the middle of the day. During these magical 2-3 weeks out of the year, the bucks go crazy. They have one thing on their mind, and that's finding does. It's literally the magical time to get out there and hunt. It is unreal. It's usually around November. During that time of year, being safe and having good food, they don't really care about. It's kind of crazy. But then again, if it's not those 3 weeks, having good food and having a place to hide is their main concern. So with that being said, how do we set up on a deer? Well, let's say it's the normal part of the year. We know that there's thick back there. The deer like to stay back there. We know this is good food. They like to eat food here. A couple strategies is one, you could either set up near the food. I don't know if you can see it, but I have a blind right back there in that corner. And I've even put out a little bit of corn pile right here. You can't see it because they've ate it all. But right there is some proof there's been some deer here. So one way that we hunt is I'll sit up in that blind, have the food here, and just sit there in the evening and wait for the deer to just migrate over to this area and start eating. That's whenever, whatever weapon you're using, you just try to take the shot. But let's say you want to go a different route. Let me pull on over here and I'll show you another way you can hunt without sitting right on top of the food. Let's say you're not allowed to hunt where they're eating. Maybe it's a golf course. Maybe it's someone's yard. Maybe it's someone's field that you don't own. Let's ride over here and I'll show you another way that you can hunt the food without being anywhere close to the food. And arguably, this way is more effective, especially on bucks. And while we're driving over here, let me just say, if you guys are just getting started hunting, take a doe, dude. Does are a lot easier. They're a great way to get started. I still like to shoot does as much as I can, but killing big mature bucks like you see on TV and YouTube videos, honestly, those are really hard. I would definitely start with a doe. They're way more fun anyways. But anyways, let's go ahead and climb up in this tree stand and I'll show you this setup. We've killed a lot of deer out of this stand right here. Once I get up there, I'll be able to point down to the ground and show you why. Now, if you're hunting out of a tree stand, be careful because, you know, you're climbing a ladder in a tree and if you fall off, the ground's hard, you know? And you're supposed to have like a strap thing that holds you into a tree stand, but don't do as I do. Anyways, I'm good enough. Here you go. So I live in the mountains, so kind of the shape of the earth determines how the deer run around. But say you're on completely flat, a lot of times they'll try to stay in the woods and move in the woods and avoid being out in the open as much as they can. But anyways, the food that we were just talking about is back there. It's probably about 150, 200 yards that way. Well, a lot of the deer actually like to stay over here in this thicker stuff. And you may be wondering, well, how do I know if they're actually staying in this thick stuff? Because what if all kinds of places look like this? How do you know where they're actually sleeping? Well, if you remember back to the very beginning of the video, I said there's two things that's important: knowing the deer, knowing the area. Well, knowing where they like to lay down at and live, that comes into number two, knowing the area. That's where you just got to get out there, walk around, look for deer sign. And I'll run around and I'll show you some deer sign right here in a minute. But I happen to know that the deer like to stay over there and actually over that hill. So I can't be right on the food. Obviously can't hunt where they're sleeping because, well, if I walk in there, they're going to jump up and run away. So what I did here, we set up a stand right in the middle. That way during the day, they're sleeping over there. When it gets towards the evening, they're going to pop up. Since this is a natural point, it's like a ridge right here. They like to walk on this ridge. They'll either come through right through here. Maybe they'll come through right over there. They got a pretty big area that they can come through. But regardless, the way it usually works is they stand up way over there. We don't see them stand up. They start migrating throughout the evening. They end up passing somewhere through here. Somewhere. Sometimes it's right here. Sometimes it's over there on the other side of the fence. But they generally start migrating through here on their way to the field back in there. And hey, there you go. You know where they're starting, point A. You know where they're probably going, point B. You get somewhere in the middle and hope for the best. Let me tell you this. They ain't going to bed right there every single day. They're not going to eat back there every single night. They're still animals. They're still bored. They still have thoughts. They do things strategically. They do things for no reason at all. Sometimes deer just do things that don't make sense, and they don't really need it to make sense. Because why'd you go to Burger King the other day, not Wendy's? I don't know. You just kind of wanted to eat somewhere else. And that's kind of what deer do too. They're not robots. They are still animals, which makes it fun whenever you actually do make it work. But the first set we was talking about, boom, you're over there. You're sitting on the food, waiting for them to come to it. Boom, over here, you're kind of in between where they're laying, in between where they're going, and hoping to come and pass through. Now in the state where I'm at, we're actually able to bait, which means put out corn. It's not a bad idea. If you want to go that route, we've put corn right down there in that opening quite a bit. And the deer do come to it. Since they're starting over there, they're ending over here. As they pass through, it gives them a natural little place to stop and eat your corn on the way. That'll actually let them sit still a bit longer, give you more time to take a shot. But overall, the basics, if you know where they're starting, know where they're going, you can set up where they're going or set up in between, and you should have a pretty good chance at seeing some deer. But just real quick, let's walk back in the woods a little bit, and I do want to show you guys what some deer sign looks like. Just so that if you get out and walk through the woods, you kind of know what you're looking for. And I'll show you a bunch of different kinds of deer sign, but let's start right over here on a fence. There's a lot of fences. Now, in order for deer to cross this fence, they're gonna have to jump it or go under it. But I'm just looking at the top strand of the barbed wire to see if I find somewhere that might have some deer fur on it. And as you're looking through these thick spots, you may also be able to see a really defined trail through the weeds. And I believe I found a really defined trail right up here, so let's look at it. This is one that I've previously known about, but look at that right there. You can see that, right? I mean, you can see how like tall and fluffy everything is, but then right through here, you can see it looks like it's kind of been beat down right through there. There's a really good chance that's a deer trail, especially if it's in a deer area. Dang, look at that one. There's another pretty used one. I think you can see it okay on camera, but it goes straight through there. You can just see where the animals have been moving. Now let's move on over here. I'll show you some more deer dookie. That's always a good sign of where they're living at. We're actually gonna go find the exact one that I poked earlier because we know where it's at. But yeah, right there it is. Pretty much deer dookie is gonna be a bunch of little pellets. Sometimes it's clumped together, sometimes it's each individual pellet. Now let's go find a deer track and I'll show you what that looks like. Who knows, we may even get back in here and find a deer bed. That's something that's really important too. And we're doing all this not only to learn more about the animal, but more about the land you're hunting on and how the animals relate to it. Because if you know those two things, you're pretty dialed. The more you learn about the animal, the more you know about how they're gonna react to different things. The more you learn about the land, the more you understand why the animals live and eat and lay down where they do. Pretty cool, it really is, it's super cool. Now I bet we're gonna see a deer track right here because it's a little bit wet. And I was correct. Check it out, we just found some deer tracks. Right here, you can see that hoof right there. Right there is another little hoof. There's some more hoofs, whatever. Where you find these, you know there's deer. You know what? If you're really hunting for a big buck, maybe look more for the buck tracks, but if you're just hunting for a deer, hey, I suggest you hunt for does first, especially if you just get started. The does are gonna be easier, they're more plentiful, the meat even tastes better, and it's a really good way to just learn more about the animal. And plus, let me say this, guys. I know we see a bunch of really big deer on YouTube. Not everywhere has big deer. So if you're expecting a giant buck, those giant bucks don't really exist everywhere. And I know they exist all over YouTube. Yeah, well, YouTube's a little bit different, you know what I mean? There's probably bigger deer on YouTube than behind your house. But if there's deer behind your house, it's always a good place to try. Now, let's say you want to get a little bit deeper. This is a good time. You could get a trail camera. These are little cameras that you put out in the woods. Say you put it on that tree, it's motion activated, you point it on this trail, and then boom, whatever comes down this trail, the trail camera is going to take a picture of it so that not only can you learn more about the deer in general, but you can also learn about what uses this area, if they use this area, because sometimes you'll put up a trail camera on this really nice looking trail thing, and you'll figure out the deer don't really even use it that much. But then you may move it, and then you find out, well, the deer use that trail every single day. Obviously, hey, that's probably a better spot to hunt where there's just more activity. But that there is just the basics of deer hunting. Overall, it's learning about the animal, learning about the place you're hunting, figuring out where they like to sleep and hide, figuring out where they like to eat, getting somewhere in between. But now let's say you're going deer hunting and you want to know where to shoot a deer. Click right over here. I'll show you where you want to shoot a deer to kill it effectively. Or if you're wondering about different weapons to kill deer, click right over here. I go over the rifles, bows, crossbows, and everything you need to know about that.